Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining the Ken Keltner first virtual chapter meeting of 2023. We haven't had one for a couple of months, and it feels like, how do I do this again? So if it looks like I'm lost, it's because I probably am. Our special guest tonight is Adam McCalvy, the MLB.com rookie Brewer reporter. He's only got 21 years in now, 21 or 22? 22.
I don't even want to know.
Yeah. So Adam's joining us. Real quickly before we get started, just a reminder that our chapter and the Chicago chapter are having the joint chapter meeting that we've done annually, and we're going to do it live for the first time. We did one in 2020, I think, just before the COVID hit, so we didn't know better. So this will be the first one in at least 3 years that'll be live at the Brat Stop in Kenosha on January 28th. So that should be fun, I hope. And I'm flying up. For those who don't know where I live, the president of the Wisconsin chapter lives in Sun City, Arizona. Barry Bloom, who's the president of the Arizona chapter, actually lives 29 miles closer to Wisconsin than I do. So, but I'll be flying up for that. So I hope the weather you guys are having holds. So keep that in mind if you're in the area. So with that said, I just want to thank Adam for joining us. I follow your newsletter. I listen to your podcast, so I try to pay attention to what you're talking about a lot. And usually, I don't swear at you too often, so that's helpful.
Yeah, that's good. I'll try to keep that streak alive.
Yeah. I think you were one of our first Zoom meetings, possibly the second. You appeared with us in April 23 of 2020, and you really did a good job. We talked about your background and things. It was a interesting time in April of 20. We had no idea what was going on with COVID, with the season. So there's a lot of talk about that, and really no one had much for answers. But I'm going to include that in the newsletter so that we'll have both recordings. And I enjoyed listening to it, and you were very good on it. So the pressure's on you tonight, Adam. So
yeah, I'll try to have something a little better.
Okay.
This time.
Normally I start, first of all, just to give a little on your background, you're a graduate of University of Wisconsin, majoring in journalism. You were one of the original hires at MLB in 2001, pretty fresh out of college. And so it's one heck of a gig that you've had here for a while. So that's very nice. And at that time, you were talking about your first and only book at this point, the Milwaukee Brewers at 50. And we had a good conversation on that, some good questions on it. And we were at the some point near the end of the meeting, we'll have a drawing to give a copy of that book away. So if you see me disappear, you don't see what I'm doing. I'm printing out the list of everybody's here so I can number it for the drawing. Normally when I start out, I ask a question. What is your earliest baseball memories? You told us that last time, and see if you still agree with it. You don't remember your first game.
No, I wish I did. I'm always so jealous of people who can name the game and the box score and the whole deal. I wish I had that.
No, I'm not there either. Your earliest memory goes back to the '87 team when you were 9.
Yep.
And you remember the Easter game, Molly streak. And that's really when you said you first started falling in love with baseball. Your favorite player, you talked about the Yount, Molitor, what most people at that point, it was one or the other. You were on the Molitor side. I don't swear at you for that, but I disagree. And the reason, and one of the reasons for that is that Molly was always on base, and you like that part. Mm-hmm. And your favorite non-Brewer was who?
My favorite non-Brewer? Oh, Will Clark.
Yeah. So I thought, well, I when you said that, I remember.
Geez, that's a lot of pressure to not say someone else there.
Yeah. So
same thing you said last time. She had a good memory.
Yeah. So to start out with an icebreaker question, there's a new question I started using a little bit ago, and that is, if you had a time machine opportunity, and you could go back in time to any baseball event or to see some ball player, who or what would that be?
Ooh, that's such a good question.
Yeah.
Does everybody say Jackie Robinson? I mean, that one jumps to mind. I bet that,
No, we get them all. They're very interesting answers.
yeah, I mean, maybe because I've just spent so much time around Selig and heard him talk about Jackie so much and go
Yeah.
down to Wrigley Field on the train, which is my favorite part of his story. Is in 1947, Bud was, help me, 13 years old, maybe, and he took the train down to Chicago by himself to see Jackie Robinson, which is like
Mhm.
a great part of the story. Now, however old he was, or young, doesn't
Yeah.
go to the end of the block without some parent having an eye on him, and he's getting on a train and going down to Chicago. So probably seeing Jackie Robinson that first season just jumps to my mind as something. And again, that's probably the Selig influence, because he talks about that as he thinks the most impactful thing that's probably ever happened in baseball.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's one that jumps to my mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the other question I have is, where did the statement "sweet, sassy, molassy" come from?
Ray Romano on Saturday Night Live. There's a great Saturday Night Live sketch where he's an ESPN anchor and he's really bad. And he just, I think it was before there's a viral video of a kid who was really bad and doing a college sportscast. I think it was probably before that well, I don't know. But anyway, Ray Romano does this sketch where he's a bad Sports Center anchor trying to come up with like Chris Berman-esque catchphrases. And he keeps yelling out "sweet, sassy, molassy." And it's a good one.
Yeah.
You can link to that in the next newsletter too, Ken.
Yeah, I'll see if we can find that. Okay, that's good. So I'll start. If anybody has questions, type them, raise your hand to ask them. I don't necessarily have to ask all the questions, but I do have one I'd like to start out with. When you run into fans, talk to fans, email, text, Twitter, whatever, what are they talking about? Are they talking about the 2000 season, which often means hater? Are they talking about the off-season activity or lack thereof until recently? Are they talking about Matt Arnold at all, or are they just talking about the Packers? Which,
Yeah.
so what are you hearing out there?
Well, yeah, maybe the Brewers always fight that. The Packer, the fight for attention with the Packers, maybe not so much this year. Look, I think if it's just like casual fan, a friend of mine that's a casual fan, the Josh Hader story was just, it was so it's almost like, to me, like watching a baseball game in itself. Like the thing I love about baseball is you can go to a game and you can like watch as little or as much of it as you want. You can go there and just sit back and have popcorn and enjoy a day at the ballpark and see what the final score is. Or you can dissect every little twitch and movement on the field and every little shift, every little half step by the shortstop, every little, the center fielder taking a step based on where he thinks the ball is going to be pitched. There's such a wide variance of how deep you can get into a single baseball game. That's, I think, the beautiful part about the game. And the Hader trade is like a microcosm of that. I hope this makes sense, in that it was a super complex transaction. I think you can be like a logical fan and see the reasoning behind the trade, and you can disagree with it for sure. But I think you can think about where Hader was at in his career arc, what sort of a team the Brewers are in the economic hierarchy of this sport, what the economics of baseball are as a whole. And you can sort of like think along as a GM, or you can just see a first place team traded one of its best players, and that was done. And like, those are, to me, like the two ends of the spectrum. There's like this simple way to look at it and this super complex way to look at it. And everybody's right, kind of like you can look at it any way you want. So I think when I talk to common fans, it is confusing that a team in first place with this, arguably the best closer in the sport, certainly top 3, 4, 5, would trade away a guy like that when they didn't have to. And it's a fascinating move. I think the more I've thought about it, I've kind of come to the conclusion that one way to look at it is it was a logical move. And it didn't work. And it also wasn't communicated well. And I don't think it was communicated well inside the clubhouse. And I don't think they did a good enough job. And I think they'll admit this, of communicating to fans the thinking. I think they did that at a couple of occasions, but I think they needed maybe to do more of that. And I guess one thing I'm really curious about moving forward is there's going to be more versions of that trade coming up, just because they built a good team based on young talent. And we're seeing those guys get into a really interesting portion of their careers from a business point of view. Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff, Willie Adames, Eric Lauer's a pretty good pitcher. Those guys all have 2 years remaining before free agency. That's like a fascinating little wheelhouse of time on the business side of this sport. So there's more unpopular moves coming. They are not going to sign every player I just named, plus, Luis Urias, Devin Williams. I think they each have 3 years remaining. They're not going to sign every one of those players to a 9-year deal. That's not how life is going to work in this market. And we can talk about that too, because I think there's probably some people who are good, smart fans who think there's no reason it shouldn't happen here, that an owner in this sport should be able to spend whatever they want. So we can talk about that too. I don't think it's going to happen. I wonder whether there were lessons learned in what happened with Josh Hader, both inside the clubhouse and in the public, that are going to inform the way that they handle the next unpopular move, whatever that turns out to be.
Yeah. Mike Hoffert's got a question probably along that line. Will we see the Brewers trade off all their stars the same way the Cubs did? And will they at least win a World Series before they do that?
Well, I mean, they're trying.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of big differences, I think. One, the Cubs push much further financially and did dip, I think, more seriously into the free agent market. I mean, Jason Hayward comes to mind, which is, I think, a fascinating example, because it's a deal that shows you the hazards of getting into that, dipping your toes into the free agent market. I mean, they vastly overpaid for Jason Hayward, but they won a World Series. So the difference, I think, where the Brewers are at now and when the Cubs sell-off happened, the Cubs are at the end of that window when they sold off their guys. They faced a situation where they had all of those great players, Bryant, Rizzo, they were at the end of their control. The Brewers are not there yet with their core star players. So their window is a lot more open, I think. But look, like I said, I do think that the next 2 years are going to be fascinating from the point of view of, you have this talented staff. This is the best pitching they've ever had. And it's rare that a club can build this level of depth with really good arms. This is their opportunity to do it. And the window is closing, I think, on them for this group of players. And the question is, how hard are they going to push when opportunities arise to fill in the spots where they need to fill in? And so far this winter, it's been very quiet. But again, there's still that the window is open longer, I think, than other clubs that maybe have kind of pushed the chips in a lot more when they feel like the window is about to close and they need to go for it now.
Sorry, I was trying to print this stuff out, and so I got lost on this. How about, are you hearing much? Dixie, you got a question? Go ahead and ask your question. Oh, Dixie, you're muted. Still not hearing you, Dixie.
Send them a chat message, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on while Dixie's looking at that. You're talking about the communication. One of the questions I have, particularly on the clubhouse. Do you think that had anything to do with Stearns changing roles? I don't know if it came from the top or maybe he felt like he was out of it. Do you think that played a role?
No, I don't think so. But I think the interesting question is, did what happened with the fallout from the Hader trade influence Stearns' decision to step aside when he did? And we did get an opportunity to ask him that. And, I give him credit. I thought he was pretty frank in his answers when he did step aside. I think those are two separate issues. I think the issue with Stearns was, like these players, he was coming to the end of a contract. The Brewers wanted to lock him up long term again, and he wanted to keep his options open. I think, like any executive who's thought of pretty highly in the industry, he was going to have some other opportunities, and experience had shown in the last couple of years that he was not going to get a chance to explore those opportunities while he's under contract with the Brewers. They were not going to let him talk to the Mets. They were not going to let him talk to Houston if that opportunity came up, or other clubs. So he was unwilling to sign beyond this last year on his contract. And then I think you look at it from the Brewers' point of view, the Mark Attanasio point of view. It's hard to have a general manager as a lame duck. It's hard to have a manager as a lame duck. I think it's harder for a GM, because all of their decisions need to be made with now under consideration, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, and maybe even longer than that. And how do you make decisions in a 3 or 5-year time frame when you're a lame duck going into the final year and you're pretty sure you're going to have opportunities elsewhere? So I think that's more likely what happened there. Look, like, the clubhouse is a complicated place, and maybe the Josh Hader story inside the clubhouse is different if there's more of a group conversation the day after that trade happens. Maybe it's different if there's I'm trying to think of a good player from years past. Maybe it's different if there's a Prince Fielder on the team who gets everybody together and says, look, we're pissed. I get it. I'm pissed. I want to win. We have a window to do this right now. We have a really good, say, pitching staff. But I'm not going to let that in. I'm not going to let that, to use the way Prince Fielder would probably say it, piss me off so much that I'm going to suck the rest of the year. So let's not suck. I don't think they had a guy like that on this roster, and that's no fault of the front office. It's just the circumstances of this team. I don't know who that guy is on this particular team. And I think that hurt him. So it was this kind of toxic mix of, it was like a situation where everything that could go wrong did, including Matt Bush giving up a bunch of homers and Trevor Rosenthal never throwing a pitch for the Brewers, and these deals that they thought they had for a hitter not panning out because they just didn't get done before the deadline. Everything that could go against them in those couple of weeks right around the trade deadline did. And it just led to this kind of toxic atmosphere. And baseball's so funny that way. You can be the most talented team and you get in a bad place as a club and bad things happen. And I think back to the 21 Brewers. If you think about in August 2021 or early September, where they go to Cleveland, Burns and Josh Hader throw a no-hitter. The next day they blow out the then Indians. And then they go to Detroit and lose 2. And they basically didn't hit the rest of the year. They went from blowing out Cleveland the day after throwing a no-hitter to not hitting the rest of the year and into the playoffs against the Braves. Yeah. That was a really talented team that they really thought could do a lot of damage. And then you saw the Braves team that beat them win the World Series. So I don't know how to explain that part of baseball. Once you get some bad juju, how you break that up. I know Brent Suter tried everything he could possibly do down the stretch, the silly stuff, even like the pop a shot machine in the clubhouse and all the little things he tried to do to kind of turn on the vibe, but they weren't able to do it. So I don't know, that Hader trade, trading Josh Hader doesn't explain what happened to the Brewers the rest of the way. It doesn't singularly explain all the bad things that happened next, but it certainly didn't help.
Yeah, it's it left a bad taste in everybody's mouth at the end of the season, it seemed like. And, it's, and not being a football fan, the Packers losing the other day probably put an even worse taste in the people in Wisconsin. Monday would not have been a good day to be. I'm glad I was retired, because I would have not have wanted to go into work on Monday with half my staff needing to be taken care of and taken off a suicide watch. So,
well, the Bucks need to turn it around, I think, and
Yeah.
get on a roll. That would help everybody's mood.
yeah, amen.
And look, the thing about the Brewers that's interesting is I agree with you. Like it left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. I mean, at the end of the year, I was fried just being around them. And I normally don't feel that way. And I think everybody was just a little fried. It was an emotional 2 months down the stretch. And, now this offseason has been very quiet. And I don't know if we can talk about this, like if anyone's surprised about that. I think maybe there was an argument, like it's time to make some kind of major changes based on the last 2 months of the year. They've obviously not done that because they believe that they have a talented club and that they're going to try to do it with pitching. And I do kind of find it interesting that inside the walls of the front office, at least, they sort of have kept their heads down and are kind of trying to stick with logic over the sort of being frustrated and acting on that frustration and blowing things up.
You mentioned Suter,
Yeah.
and what he did to try and turn things around with the team. Are they going to miss him?
Yeah. Like I said, because, like I see Larry Baldessaro on here. He's been around a lot of the members of this group. Rick's been around a lot of members of this group. What's made the great Brewers teams great is you can't put your finger on it. You can't point to it on a baseball card. I mean, that goes all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s. They obviously had great, talented players. But in 2008, in 2011, 2018, 19, those were good Brewers teams. A lot of what they did well was something, whatever you want to call it, magical in the air. And they had it in 2021 for a lot of that season after getting Willie Adames. He provided that spark. It wasn't there the last 2 months of the year. And look, losing does that. So was it bad chemistry or was it losing or both, or which came first? I don't know. But I do think they're going to miss Brent Suter because when you sort of think about the best players on this team, and I think people see it. I think people see it in the games when you watch the shots in the dugout. I think as a fan, you know who the guys are that are the glue guys on the team, and they have a couple. And Brent Suter was definitely one of them. Brandon Woodruff's one of them. Willie Adames is definitely one of them. Luis Urias is very quietly one of them. I don't think people know that as much. So they do have some guys that are that way, but it's not, they didn't have that good juju that they had earlier and in earlier seasons last year. And I think they will miss Brent Suter.
Yeah. Before I get to Dixie's question, the other thing you were talking about, Stern. So I printed out your 23 predictions for the season.
Oh, God, are you going to hold me to those next year when we do this?
Sure. So you have on here number 21, Stearns will be hired by another team before the end of 23, but it won't be
meaning
the Mets.
year, not the season, the year.
Yes. Okay. And it won't be the Mets or the Astros.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
my money was on the Astros. Jim Crane, their owner, introduced David Stearns and his wife, Whitney. Stearns obviously has history there. But I think Houston seems to be going in a direction now where they want a little more old school. I think Jeff Bagwell has a big voice in their front office from what I heard at the winter meetings, and they're going more that direction than with an analytics guy, which I think David Stearns probably gets painted as. Yeah. So I don't know what club it is, but yeah, that I just threw that out there as my prediction. And look, maybe it's the Mets. The Mets are the obvious one. The guy grew up in Manhattan with a transistor radio under his pillow, listening to Mets games. That's something that never leaves you when you're a baseball fan. So it wouldn't shock me if it happens. But I'll just take the field over Houston, the Mets, and I certainly think that he is running a baseball operation or is high up in someone's baseball operation after the end of this coming season, but before the end of the year.
Yeah, I would agree. Dixie has a question out here. I live 1 mile from Fenway. Do you walk to the ball games?
Jealous.
Yeah, I've never been to Fenway. One of these days.
Oh,
yeah. The SABR convention was there, and I was going, and then like a month before this convention, something came up family wise and couldn't go. I can't remember what it was. Had to really be important, and so I have not been there yet. So one of these days. So you live 1 mile from Fenway. From your perspective, 1,000 miles away, do you know what the heck's going on with the Red Sox? What the Red Sox are doing? It didn't help that they lost their shortstop now, because there's no one here does.
yeah. They have their own David Stearns and Chaim Bloom, who tries to make really smart decisions to win deals and doesn't play with his gut. And I think that the Red Sox experience, my view of it, is sort of having straddled these eras of the game, is that sometimes the logical decision isn't the right decision. Sometimes you got to do what feels right. And I wasn't there. I went to 3 games in Fenway this year. They were phenomenal. First time I was there since 2014. So I can't tell you what Xander Bogaerts meant to Boston, but like, he was a Red Sox, and they needed to sign him, even if it was a risky decision that 6 years from now looks bad. They just needed to do it. So I don't know. I can't tell you that I know what they're talking about in markets across the game when you see what the Brewers did with Josh Hader, when you see what the Red Sox experience with Xander Bogaerts. And I'm sure there's other examples of things like that that aren't coming to my mind right now. But this game always goes in waves. And for the longest time, what a hitter wanted to do is slap the ball on the ground to the left side and use his speed. And that created some Hall of Fame players, some great players. Then the game changed to where all of a sudden you just hit home runs. Now it's sort of less into like trying to hit home runs, but trying to just drive the baseball and trade exit velocity. You'll take the strikeouts in exchange for more exit velocity. That's where the game is right now. But I'm telling you, the game's going to swing again. And maybe this year with the rules changes, there's a lot of thought about speed becoming really vital to baseball again. Speed on the base paths. So my point is that like the game is always going back and forth. And if you don't like the game today, it's not going to be the game tomorrow. So maybe you'll like it tomorrow. And I think it might be kind of the same in front offices. I think there's this ebb and flow of what kind of general manager is preferred in a given era based on a team or a couple of teams that have a lot of success and win a couple of World Series in a row. Then there's all these copycats where they try to bring in a certain type of general manager to replicate that. And then when that doesn't work and there's a new branded GM, right now it's sort of the Ivy League, statistically driven, logic driven GM, that becomes very popular and in vogue. But then that changes after a while. When someone like Dave Dombrowski, for example, takes the Phillies all the way to the World Series, as old school a guy as there is in this game. So I think that it kind of ebbs and flows. And I wonder whether there are owners around the sport looking at some of these recent experiences, including the Red Sox offseason, and wondering whether sort of some of the soul of general managing needs to come back into the game a little bit, and you'll take a hit 6 years from now in order to do the right thing today.
Yeah, it's I agree. And baseball, just, pitching is good, then the hitting is good. It goes back and forth that way. And they always copy each other. And Mary's got a question, or is more of a statement. The Cubs always seem to follow the Red Sox, and they're both befuddled. So,
Well, the
it's kind of
Cubs,
balanced,
again,
yeah.
the Cubs, like, I give them a lot of leeway, I think, maybe because I was lucky enough to be there in Cleveland when they won the World Series, and it was a cool experience just to witness history like that. They got it done, something that generations of fans in Chicago thought they'd never see. They got to see and experience. So, have they made all the right decisions since then? Maybe not, but they had those rings. Those rings don't go away.
Yeah, we don't have one of them here, that's for sure. You mentioned the rules. Tim Perkins, I thought he'd ask the question. What do you think about the rule changes?
Look, they're really, it's going to be, I think, certainly the story of spring training. It's the topic I'm most interested to talk to players about, particularly pitchers, particularly a guy here in Milwaukee like Devin Williams, who's one of the slowest workers in the game and one of the best pitchers in the game. How is the new rule, the pitch clock, going to impact how he pitches? Is those couple of seconds probably don't seem like much when you're thinking about a pitch to pitch, but think about a hitter making an adjustment where a millimeter difference in his hand placement changes everything to the way he feels at the plate. A tiny adjustment of where his front foot is positioned or the way he balances his weight feels like the first time he swung a bat. And I think there could be some of that in play for some of the pitchers as they try to navigate this pace issue. And I think Devin Williams is a fascinating case study, and the guy I'm most interested in. I think I made that one of my predictions too, that he would struggle early in the season. I could see him struggling early as he adjusts to what that is like in the flow of the game. It's one thing to do it in spring training bullpens. I know they'll think about it. Spring training games, certainly they'll think about it. That's the training ground to adjust to things like that. But it's different when you get to Wrigley Field on opening day, and it's pitches that matter. So I think that's going to be a big adjustment. Now I'm thinking about the pitchers. An interesting thing Craig Counsell said at the winter meetings is he thinks we're all wrong about that, and that it's the hitters who are going to be most impacted by the pitch clock because of the pace, pitch to pitch, with all the stuff that they do, mostly inside their head, to try to get through these at bats against pitchers that are literally as nasty as has ever existed in this sport, like top to bottom. So Counsell thinks it's going to be much more of an adjustment for the hitters to get used to that pace. So we'll see. The pitch clock is the one I'm most interested in. The shift is obviously another change. A guy like Rowdy Tellez, when you line up the hitters in baseball that are, on paper is going to be most impacted. Rowdy is a big one. He, again, we're an exit velocity game right now, and there's all this data where you can see where and how hard guys are putting balls in play. And Rowdy Tellez is a guy that statistically should benefit as much as anybody from the rules with shifting. But again, Colton Wong, a really good defensive player, had a different view. He thinks it's going to be just as big an adjustment for the infielders. He was really looking forward to banned shifts, not because as a left-handed hitter, there's less likely to be an infielder sitting out there in shallow right field when he hits the ball on the ground. But for him and positioning, he's more likely going to be in those spots that he's used to his whole life. So we'll see. I mean, the aim obviously is more action, more balls in play, and quicker games. And I like quick games. So if that is a benefit, I think they said the average time in the minor leagues was cut down by 25 minutes, which is quite a thing. That would be, I think, a very good thing for baseball.
Devin Williams was your 13th prediction. He will struggle early as he adapts to the new pace of play, but he will finish the season with more saves than Josh Hader.
Well, I'm just playing the odds there.
Yeah.
Josh Hader is 140 pounds soaking wet. He's been doing this for how many years now? Slinging fastballs. max effort on every single pitch. There's got to be an expiration date on that. And I don't know where it is. And I hope it doesn't happen because he's really fun to watch, just from a baseball fan point of view. You never want a guy to get hurt or struggle. But that was another part of that Hader trade that was really interesting. Like, there's got to be an expiration date on what he does based on how he's built. And those what was happening to him in early July, I think, was kind of alarming to a lot of the people that were watching him very closely, the coaches and their analysts and all those people. And obviously he turned it around for the Padres, and good on him, because he was a weapon for them again and one of the best relievers in the game. But I don't know, he's got just a fascinating body for what he does and how long he's been able to do it.
Yeah. And you did have Rowdy Tellez as one of your predictions in your 23 as well.
Well, again, playing the numbers, like when you look at who hits the ball hard on the ground to the right side, he's way at the top of the list in baseball. So there should theoretically be more opportunities for some of those balls to sneak through and his batting average go up. The one parlor game is, how much is batting average going to go up in baseball? And we're not supposed to care about batting average anymore. It's not how teams make decisions about hitters. It's not how they value hitters anymore. But look, a hit's still a hit in this game. And I think there's going to be more hits in 2023 than there were in 2022. How many more is the question. Nobody knows.
Well, as you said here on your predictions, some are serious, some aren't. Don't hold me to any of them. I'm going to probably cross that line off by season's end. Your prediction on Rowdy Tellez was not along more hits. This is one that you were not as serious about. You figure he's going to wear Hobie Miller's uniform pants for a game and hit a home run. So not sure what's behind that story.
Hobie Milner is my leading candidate to be able to do all of our taxes. He just looks like an accountant to me. He's built like an accountant. He's if Hader's 140 pounds soaking wet, Hobie Milner is about 97 pounds. So I'd like to see Rowdy Tellez get in his jersey.
There's nothing wrong with us accounting types, particularly.
Yeah, there you go.
Those
he can do. Yeah. You can step aside and let him do your taxes.
Yeah. Okay. Tim Perkins, are you trying to ask a question out here? Or Tom Bell? I'm not seeing.
I'm trying to. Adam, what brought this thing on with Hader? And do you think that Bush and these tight games will do what Hader can do? And one more thing, what about Christian Yelich? I haven't heard you say anything about him.
Well, he's the mystery. And, as they get into, I think, the next 2 years, the story of these years are going to be who do they keep and continue to build around, and who has to go? Who do they have to let go? And, Christian Yelich is like the all-time example of what looked like a no-brainer to extend him. And he got the biggest deal by many times over in franchise history. And it looked like a steal. I mean, nobody was mad about that when it happened. And then again, it's sort of like everything that could have gone wrong did. People ask, what happened to Christian Yelich? And my answer is sort of everything. The pandemic happened. Look at the number of hitters who emerged from that weird season, the shutdown, and then that shortened season, and have never been the same. When was the last time you saw Javi Baez in the highlights? He's fallen off the face of the earth. That impacted a lot of hitters. The coming back from the knee injury definitely impacted Christian Yelich. Look at the way he stands. Look at the way he crouches in the batter's box now compared to how low he got in 2018 and 2019 in a Brewers uniform. If you kind of put those videos side by side, it's visible to the naked eye. It's also the matter of now you're the man. You're the $200 million face of the franchise. And no matter how cool you are, and he's like as cool and sort of the calm, aw shucks guy as there is, that is bound to have an impact on a human being when all of a sudden you're looked at as, anything less of what he did in 2018-19 is somehow a failure. That's a really difficult place to live, but it's what you sign up for when you sign your name on that dotted, by the X. So all of these factors, I think, all at once went into what's happened to him since then. And, Craig Counsell is in a tough spot too, because we ask him about this all the time. And there is something to, like, what can he say? So the thing he settled on saying, I think you all have heard it, where he says he needs to be the best version of himself, which sounds like a cliche, but it's actually, like, probably right. It's probably the right way for Christian Yelich to look at this. Just be as good a baseball player as you can. And right now, or at least in last season, he turned into a pretty good baseball player as a kind of a guy who gets on base and wreaks havoc. I actually think those skills could be really valuable this season because of, again, some of the rules with the pace of game are going to limit the number of times a pitcher can pick over at first base. A little thing, and I don't know how often in a week this is going to become a factor, but in some games, in some big moments, it's going to be a factor. And a guy like Christian Yelich stands to potentially, uses his feet a little bit more in what baseball looks like in 2023. So he has a chance to contribute potentially as a really good leadoff guy. Now, that's not what they pay him for. That's not why they signed him, to be a good leadoff guy. And maybe that's just life. And that's what the Brewers have to live with. And maybe eventually he comes back to being more of a run producer. But I think a good place to start would be to just be really good at this, guy who gets on base. And that may be what he is right now. So I would say it's a huge part of how well they're going to do. They need to be a little better offensively. And he is obviously a player who has the potential to be better than he was last season. And Tom, what was the first part of what you asked?
What brought this thing on with the Hader? And do you think Bush will be able to close these games out?
That going into the winter, I think the bullpen was their biggest weakness. I think a lot of the outside view is that their offense was bad last year. I think that's just offense is bad in baseball right now. Or to put it differently, pitchers are dominating the sport right now. The Brewers were above average for a Major League Baseball team in 2022, which is kind of hard to believe when you watched all the games and saw how hard it was for them to score runs. And that goes back to, like I said, the end of 2021 as well. In the run scoring environment that existed in 2022, the Brewers was it sixth in the National League in runs scored? Someone can fact check me. I think it was sixth, and above average in baseball in general offensive production. But the bullpen, I think, is an area of real interest for me because they're very deep in starters, and that's fine. But very deep in starters nowadays, it's 6 good innings, and you've got some big innings to cover at the back end of games. And I don't know who those guys are going to be. And they've done it, when you look at it, they've done a good job of kind of unearthing some gems here and there over the last couple of years and really riding those guys. Jake Cousins a couple of years ago was that guy. I think if Devin Williams is going to be your closer to the extent that they anoint someone with that title, the 7th and 8th inning are big question marks to me right now. They think Matt Bush can be that guy. He was very good for the Rangers last year before they made that trade. There's not a lot of mileage on his arm because he was an infielder for most of his life before becoming a pitcher. And now he's settling into this, relief role, and he's shown that he can be durable. So I think they think he's talented enough to be that guy. He just wasn't very good for him down the stretch last year. And then I think they've got major question marks of who else are going to fill those big time spots. Last year's breakout guy was this kid Peter Strzelecki, a fascinating, a low round draft pick. Certainly not a prospect, but he came up and pitched great for him last year late in the year, some big spots. So he has the opportunity to step up and be that kind of a guy this season. But man, going into a year, I always thought that it behooves teams to have some guys who have some closing experience. It shouldn't be that way. A good pitcher is a good pitcher. The ninth inning is no different than the seventh, but it is, except it is. And they've had that with Brad Boxberger being kind of the workman guy who's just not phased because he's been in those big spots before. And I don't know who that guy's going to be this coming season. So I think that's one of the things to look for in spring training is who Craig Counsell and Chris Hook talk about is opening some eyes, because there's certainly those big roles to be won. One guy I'm really interested about is this guy Javi Guerra they got from the Rays in a real minor trade. He's also a converted infielder. He was a shortstop for the Padres when he made his big league debut just a couple of years ago. And now all of a sudden he's converted to pitcher and he's like throwing 97 and he's apparently has really good stuff. And the Brewers are going to give him a shot. He's one of sort of not a big name acquisition this winter by any means, but he's a player I think that has an opportunity to play a decently important role for them this year.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah. I'm taking a question from my son who asked me this question to ask you earlier. So we got some questions lined up, but I'm letting my son pull rank. He wants to know, he does a lot of stuff with Marquette, and so he's busy with that tonight. He's working with Sophia, and he asked her this question, and she didn't have the answer, so it's now the pressure's on you to know it. What's with the pipeline with Seattle and trades?
Well, their GM, Jerry DiPoto,
Yeah.
wakes up every morning trying to make 6 trades.
Okay.
So if the odds are in your favor that you're going to make a trade with the Mariners.
So is there any relationship between him and Matt or the Brewers, something there that makes it easier, or just?
No, I think they just like to make trades. I think the other one is the Rays. I think there've been a lot of players back and forth between Milwaukee and Tampa, which makes tons of sense because they're similar types of teams and they have similar philosophies in terms of the way they value players, what they look for in pitchers. They often match up, I think. And there certainly is a tie because Matt Arnold was there. One of their, leading their pro scouting department before he came to join David Stearns here in Milwaukee.
Yeah. Okay. Let's questions that are starting to line up here. Let's see. Okay. Francis asked, can you explain why a hitter such as Baez would have been affected adversely by the pandemic season?
Yeah, I saw that, and it's a great follow-up. And I think the issue is combination of things. It was the way spring training was interrupted. It all of a sudden guys went cold for whatever it was, 3 months, and then came back and ramped up really quick. And I mean, I always thought this with Ryan Braun. Ryan Braun could not do anything for an entire winter, show up on March, hope as late as he could get them to agree to let him come to spring training. Hopefully for him, he would think the first week of March, take 4 swings in the cage, step into the box in the spring training game and hit a double. Like he just could wake up and hit in spring. Other hitters are different. And I think that quick ramp up in what they called summer camp messed with some hitters. The other thing then is now you begin the regular season and it's a 60-game regular season where if you have a bad 10 days at the beginning, like tons of guys do, the slow starters often do, you're buried. Like statistically, 10 days is maybe an overstatement, but if you have a slow couple of weeks early and it takes you a while to get into a year, statistically, you just can't get to where you want to be. And for some guys, maybe that's fine. They shake it off and it's not how you start, it's how you finish, yada, yada. For other guys, I think that it was a challenge. And I think if you, again, sometime go back and look at those 2020 stats And just look at the number of hitters who were really good baseball players and really struggled with the circumstances of 2020. The other part of it is no fans in the stands. You got to create your own energy every day.
Mhm.
So I think that sort of stew was fine for some guys and really toxic to others. And then at the same time, technology was happening in really 2019 is where I first remember really talking about it. The Brewers pitching lab, the advancements in tracking tech for pitching, the price drops for that equipment where pitchers, Josh Lindblom, for example, a mid-tier pitcher, has the resources to build a lab at home to say, I want to up the spin on my fastball. And he does it at home now because he can afford these Rapsodo, these high-speed cameras that otherwise were beyond the reach of all but the richest pitchers. The pitching tech has pushed pitching into the stratosphere. And I think all of that was happening right around that 2019, 2020. So that's a part of the story as well. So for all those reasons, I think some really good hitters had bad years and some guys haven't been able to dig themselves out of it.
Yeah. Mary adds here that Javi also likes to play in front of a big crowd. So the empty stadium probably was a challenge.
Well, I would think he more than Yelich definitely feeds off the crowd. Although I can't say I'm not in Christian Yelich's head. Maybe he also needs the crowd to get the juices flowing.
Yeah. This is Tim Perkins has got a good question. When I read it, I thought I haven't thought about this for a while, but I really like it. Is there a future Gold Glover on the team?
Garrett Mitchell comes to my mind right away as a guy who has the potential to be that sort of a player. If he gets, for him, it's staying healthy, right? He's already had some injury issues in the minor leagues before getting to Milwaukee. And part of that is managing diabetes and keeping his body right. That's an added, just a fact of his life that's different for him than other players. But I think he has the potential to be that. I think Willie Adames, the Brewers would say, his teammates would say, has the potential to be a Gold Glove shortstop. He has just the raw skills. The arm jumps out when you watch him play. He's got to clean up like the common mistakes. The other guy I'm really interested in, and I had to do one of these videos that I occasionally they have me do, and I talked today about this kid they drafted last year, Bob Moore. Robert Moore is the son of Dayton Moore. He was the Brewers' second-round pick last year, and he's apparently a fabulous defensive player. He's a second baseman, and I'm really interested to watch him this year in the coming years because he came out of college. He's an advanced hitter. He grew up around his dad with the Royals, winning the World Series, and just has seen what it takes to be a big leaguer. So he's a guy I think it could move really fast. So, I mean, we're projecting a guy who just got drafted last year, so I'm probably too early to give him his Gold Glove, but he's just someone I'm eager to watch in the next couple of years.
Oh, that's good to hear. Will Willie Adames win that Gold Glove as a member of the Milwaukee Brewers may be the question.
Well, look, I don't know. I try to think in my head of like these guys, these arbitration guys, who they have to figure out who's most likely to sign. He'd be on my list. I know he really likes it here. I know he really is interested in an offer. He told David Stearns that before the end of last season that, look, if I'll talk. I'd like to talk about an extension. So I will put him on my list of players that they do keep around beyond his current contract. And I'm in the prediction mood. Let's just say he does win a Gold Glove as a Brewer.
Good. I like that one a lot. I like Gold Glove shortstop.
I mean, I'll be wrong about how many of those other 23. We might as well add a 24.
Yeah.
By the way, Tim Perkins asked that question. Tim, do you get Sal Bando as your doppelganger ever? I've got Sal Bando just on Zoom as your doppelganger.
I'll take that as a compliment, but no.
Yeah, he's a good looking man. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Mike Carey's got his hand up. Mike, you got a question there?
Yeah, it's been fun listening to all the the talk here on baseball in the middle of winter. But the one question that you haven't brought up or anybody thrown at you yet is it seemed that last year the Brewers took a real hit in the attendance. And what I'm wondering is I've not seen that anywhere be addressed. One, what are the reasons, do you have or have the Brewers talked about that? And I've seen no real push out of them to promote, buying tickets other than their standard issue stuff. And, you started off the call with the winter warm up going to the bar, which I saw that the other week. And I was like, wow, that's really strange because if they can get 400 people in that bar, I'm thinking that's a jam-packed place.
Yep. Well, when they did when they would do the on deck, they would draw 26,000 if my memory serves.
Mhm.
But then you get the coverage of that event. So your reach is beyond that. But I think that's what we were talking about before we got started is what is the bang for the buck and doing the full blown on deck versus trying to reach out in other ways. I agree with you, Mike. Like the attendance thing is a concern. And again, sometimes I think we get focused on what's happening in front of our faces here, like this. I go back to the offense being bad, and sometimes forget to look around the sport. I think the attendance issue is an issue around the sport, and you can't blame everything on the pandemic. But I think what Rick Schlesinger, if he were on this Zoom, would say is that is a factor here. I think people created different habits during the pandemic. And I think we're seeing it in all sorts of areas. The Golden Globes last night, James Cameron is up there begging people to go back to the movies because we can watch the movies at home now on streaming services. I think baseball faces a similar issue in that people stayed home with their families and watched the games on television. And maybe some of them enjoyed it and they're less likely now because of the cost to go out and take a family of four to a baseball game. And that's an issue. And I think that's part of the driver for some of these changes to improve the pace of play, try to make this game more appealing to a wider swath of fans. Everybody here is going to watch baseball next year, whether the games are 3.5 hours or 3 hours.
Yep.
But I think there's a broader swath of fans that are not going to watch games that are 3.5 hours long. And they're trying to appeal to a wider demographic by trying to get a little more action going on the field. So I think you're 100% right to say that is an issue for the Brewers and other clubs. And all the more reason for them to communicate in as many ways as possible. And you make a good point that the Fan Fest is one way to reach out, and it's not happening this year. And they probably should think about other ways. What other ways are they reaching out to people? Especially, by the way, another issue that is really big in baseball that doesn't get talked about a lot is this issue with regional sports networks, where so many people now are losing their access to watching teams. That's another big problem that needs to be solved in the next couple of years, that has to do with the reach of the sport. So that is a huge issue for baseball. And I think I think they hope to see if there's more action on the field, I think they hope that it's a more appealing product coming this season.
Yeah. Dixie has another question. I see Mary's hand was up. Before I get to Dixie's question, earlier we were talking about, I think Francis mentioned he was a millionaire because of all the play ball calendars he had. And so Francis, the way he spent his money is he used to walk to Fenway Park for 30 years. He had season tickets. It was a crooked 1.2 miles, about 20 minutes. Tickets from 1988 to 2017. Sounds wonderful. They started at $18 each to $140. Yikes. I had 4 seats behind the third base dugout, dead even with the third baseman. I was closer to third baseman than the second baseman. Those are nice. And sorry about his audio from earlier. He's had some issues with from a previous Zoom. But he asked the question here. First, I'm going to take a second part of this question. Do you have a vote in the Hall of Fame?
No, not yet. You have to be a an active member of the BBWA for 10 years. And MLB.com was put under the umbrella of the BBWA beginning in 2016. So that was the first time that I had a BBWA card and could vote on MVP, Cy Young, those other things. So I have a couple more years. I need a couple more years of service before I get a Hall of Fame vote.
Okay, and good. That's neat.
Oh, we
do you
can
have-
talk it out on one of these, and you guys
Yeah.
can help me fill out my ballot.
That would be wonderful. Do you have, and he also asked if you have any guesses as to how the Hall of Fame vote's going to turn out.
No, and to be honest, because I'm not because I don't have a vote, I haven't paid a lot of attention to that. I suppose I should.
You have nothing else to do. You wish, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Hey, they did sign a free agent.
Yeah.
The Brewers finally got around. They were the last team in baseball to sign a free agent.
Oh, I didn't know they were last. Wow.
They were the very last team. Now they signed a free agent to a big league contract, an outfielder, but he was a minor league free agent, but he got a big league deal. So Blake Perkins is the sort of trivia question for sometime down the line. We'll see where
There is it looks like there's a question out on the beat report. How will Wade Miley fit into the Brewers loaded rotation? So there's a question out there. I don't know, that MLB, I should open it up and see who that is.
Oh, it's me.
That is you. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought it might be you. So
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's like, the way I look at it is their rotation is Burns, Woodruff, Peralta, Lauer, Aaron Ashby, Adrian Hauser, Wade Miley. This guy Jansen Junk they got from the Angels has the worst possible name for a pitcher, except Bob Walk. But they actually like him. He's a good prospect, and he's had a little toes dipped in the big leagues. They actually like him down the line. They just picked up this guy, Bryce Wilson, from the Pirates, who's not that far removed from being a top 100 prospect in baseball. The problem is he's got this great fastball in AAA that comes up and gets whacked around in the big leagues. So he's got to figure that out. So he's a candidate for sure for the pitching lab down in Phoenix. And then they picked up another starter named Tyson Miller, one of their first moves of the offseason, a waiver claim from the Rangers. Then they've got Ethan Small, who people were pretty excited about when he got called up to the big leagues last year. He got knocked around a lot after getting called up. They have numbers for sure. And I don't know how all those guys are going to fit. Adrian Hauser could be a bullpen arm. Bryce Wilson could be a interesting bullpen arm. Again, the player they got from the Pirates. He's out of options, so he'll have to stick or be, someone will have the chance to get him on waivers. So they definitely have depth in the starting rotation. And the way I put it in that video, thank you for previewing this for me.
Sure, no charge.
Yeah. Is if they get to the end of spring training and they have this problem, they'll feel good. Like if the issue is, boy, where do we fit Wade Miley onto the staff? We just paid him $6.5 million. I think they'll take that as a good problem. But the fact is, stuff happens. Someone won't be ready on opening day. Someone will get, step on a cactus or get stung by a scorpion and be on the IL. So they really want to be protected this year when things go wrong. They did not fare well last year in games not started by those first 6 guys I named. Burns, Woodruff, Lauer, Peralta, Hauser, Ashby. I think I just named 6. They did not fare well in the remaining 45 or so games. And that's the difference. That's why they weren't in the playoffs last year. So they want to be really covered with depth of starting pitching for what can come up. In other words, no offense to Jason Alexander, a fine pitcher. Credit to him for getting to the major leagues. He made 11 starts for the Brewers last year. Early on, he was very effective. But that's not ideal. I think they want to have some different, maybe better options for those 11 or so starts that went to Jason Alexander last year.
Mike Hopper added that Miley, if he's healthy, would be a useful swingman also. So
Yeah, that's an interesting part of the sport. That swingman role is, it used to be there was a spot in, who's a great Brewers, Seth McClung, a guy who like bounced back and forth and came up in some big moments. That kind of long reliever, Dave Burba. I don't know that those guys are really they're not around as much anymore. It's more often that you bring up, the Brewers have done this really well, bring up a young guy, start him when you need to start him, pitch him out of the pen when you need to pitch him out of the pen. And instead of being like sort of a soft tosser who can eat 3-4 innings in a bad game, he's like, you've got these like electric arms that can come in and throw like 2 or 3 phenomenal innings. And then start the next time around if the schedule dictates that you need a starter. They've kind of, I think the sports kind of changed the way they look at that role. So Miley could be that, but I think they'd rather have somebody like an Ashby to be that guy who bounces back and forth as needed and come in with like prime stuff.
Yeah. You've been going for about an hour. You got time for a few more questions?
Yeah, of course, for sure.
I appreciate that greatly. Tim Perkins, another question here. Which player in the system are you expected to see get their shot in 2023?
Well, look, the obvious one that I think is Sal Frelick. It just, everything last season from afar looked like he is ready to come up and make an impact in the big leagues. Everyone who plays with him loves him. Everyone who's coached him in college, high school, wherever he's been, love him. He's a gamer. He's a hard-nosed sort of, he's a Boston College guy. He's a Northeaster. He's a hockey guy, is the way Al LaBeouf, one of my favorite coaches in the Brewers system, the hitting coach at AAA, and a baseball lifer himself. The way he described Sal is that he's a hockey player playing baseball. He comes with that mentality, the kind of toughness. So I think he's certainly a player to watch. The other guy who's probably just the opportunity is there right in front of his face is Bryce Terang, who I don't know that he's gotten a lot of love in terms of like being a top prospect because he does it maybe a little more quietly. He certainly talks quietly, and when he's on camera, he's not, Mitchell is like, boy, it's like this guy's superstar in front of the cameras. Bryce Terang is not that guy, but on the field, he plays hard. He plays all over the infield now. They've expanded his defensive repertoire. It looks like he stands to get a ton of at-bats at second base, potentially. We'll see what happens the rest of the offseason, but as the roster kind of sits right now, it looks like he has a really good chance to be a left-handed hitting second baseman for them with Colton Wong gone to Seattle. Opportunity in terms of like who's got the opportunity right there. Bryce Terang is a definite guy to watch.
Yeah, that's your 16th prediction that he would have the most at bats for the Brewer rookies.
Yeah, and look, that's not a very bold prediction because I think if he doesn't, then it'd be a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
If it's someone else, I think it would be, a surprise. Here's another guy I just would like to see in the majors because of how damn entertaining it would be is Joey Wiemer. I don't know if anybody has ever like seen highlights of him swing the bat in minor league videos. He's never been cheated on a single swing in his entire life. Every time he swings the bat, his intent is to hit the ball 700 feet. And I don't know if that's sustainable over the course of a major league career. It's worked for him in the minor leagues. He's going to be a swing and miss guy. Too much swing and miss doesn't work. I think Keston here is an example of that. So he's going to have to learn when to shorten up. That's what you have to do to live as a big league hitter. But just from a pure entertainment standpoint, he has a chance to be something really fun to watch just because of the way he plays kind of with his hair on fire.
Yeah. I'm excited about Owen Miller. He's not the greatest ball player on the team, but he would be the 12th Wisconsin ball player. I know Jim Williams on here, he follows Wisconsin ball players. So what type of role do you think he's going to play on the team?
Well, look, again, he's one who really depends on what other moves are coming this offseason. I mean, the Brewers have an opportunity. If they see a third baseman they like, I think there's room to add a good third baseman. It'd probably be a trade at this point for it to be somebody notable. And that could change the entire makeup of the infield because it impacts where Luis Urias fits in. He's an underrated player in terms of what the advanced metrics say about his contribution. He was one of the Brewers' most valuable hitters last year, if you go by the advanced numbers. So I think maybe the value of what I just think he has more value than he gets credit for. So, but that story could change if they add someone else. So right now, I think Miller is maybe the kind of Jace Peterson guy who bounces around, gets at bats at third, gets at bats at second. He can probably play the corners if you want. He can certainly play first base. He played a lot there for Cleveland. So I think he has a chance to be sort of the utility type and everything. You know, he's a Wisconsin guy, so he's like a blue collar, put me in wherever you want to put me in sort of player. And sounds like that is right now where his role probably sits.
Yeah, cool. Before you were talking about Craig Counsell and conversations you have with him, I've got a statement ahead of that. Not a statement. Your 19th prediction on Craig is he'll get his first gray hair. I'm surprised he hasn't had any after the last 2 years. How is he to deal with as a member of the press?
The way I look at Craig Counsell is he doesn't fill your notebook like other managers in the game do, but everything he says, I find myself wanting to share because it's something meaningful. It is something that he's thought a lot about. I think he thinks a lot about what he's going to say when there's something controversial or difficult that happens. I think he puts a lot of thought into what he's going to say to fans, essentially. So he's a very thoughtful person. He understands our job. And look, he can be extremely difficult at times because he's the one who has to get up there twice a day and answer for when things go bad. In the last 2 months of last season, his job was pretty trying because over and over and over, he's getting these same questions about basically what's going on and how is this all related to an unpopular trade? And how many times can you answer that question? So he is definitely, if you rank the Brewers managers of how they are to deal with, he's high on the list in terms of, being good to the press. Davey Lopes, by the way, was my worst. He was not easy. Larry's laughing because he had to deal with him. He was very, very challenging, and he was managing for he's obviously a legend of the sport and coached a long time. And now he's managing for the first time. He was not comfortable in that role. And I think Ned Yost as a Brewers manager was often in the same boat. I think he was a very different guy in Kansas City than he was in Milwaukee because it was the first time doing the job. And that's a really difficult job. That talking to the public twice a day, every day, even in a small market, is not an easy job at all. It is one of the most kind of important things they do in terms of the marketing the club, like keeping the club in the public eye and, being of interest to fans. It's important, but it also is, I think, a very difficult part of their job and just not natural to certain people.
Well, I think one of the things that you mentioned is things are going bad and you get the same question every day for weeks at a time where new team comes in, new reporters ask the same questions you've been getting over and over. So yeah, that doesn't sound like fun to me.
Yeah, which is why guys like Buck Showalter, who can make it look like they're having a ball, are an interesting breed. Because he looks like he loves it every time he sits down with these guys, and he's got something new for him every time. And some guys look like it's, they're going to the dentist's office every time.
Yeah. Your 15th projection here, or prediction was Jackson Chourio. Is that how it's pronounced? Will spend most of the season at Double-A and have a tough time replicating last season's rocket trip. He'll finish the year at Triple-A.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about high expectations. He's number
Yeah.
10 in our MLB.com top 100 prospect list in the sport. That's about as high as I can remember a Brewers player. And I mean, you're going back to Ryan Braun, Prince Fielder to find a prospect that looks like Jackson Chourio does after last season, where he just blew through every level. He was the youngest player in Low A, the youngest player in High A, the youngest player in Double-A, and the youngest player in Triple-A, which is, you don't see that every day. Now he's going to be 19 years old. He's already touched all these levels. He's now got to do it again. And that is a really difficult thing to do. And there are plenty of prospects in history who struggled with that. Once you're sort of anointed this top prospect, it's difficult. And the great ones obviously are still great. So they're very high on him. I would say when you think about, like, you can always tell when you talk to one of the player development guys, when they really, really like a player, they lower their voice, like they don't want to share any secrets. And they do it with Chourio, although you can't hide him. Everybody sees him. Everybody knows him. The other guy they do that with is a catcher named Jefferson Caro, who's in their system. And he's in the Brewers top 30. He had a good year last year, played in the fall league. He's not like rocket ship up these prospect lists, but he's a top prospect. He's a guy that when you talk to the evaluators and the scouts, really opens eyes the way he commands the field. So he's just to throw out some names of guys to keep an eye on for next season. I think he's one. And look, they had this catching prospect, Mario Feliciano, who for the last 3, 4, 5 years was supposed to be the next big thing. And he wasn't. He hasn't turned out to be. So there's opportunity in the system for, even though they just got William Contreras, who's 5 years of control, there's an opportunity for a good prospect in the system to, climb the ranks and get to the big leagues.
Yeah. And you have Contreras hitting 30 home runs this year.
Well, that one might be a little, if of all the 23 predictions that I put out there, of like the serious ones, that one might be a little stretch. He had 21 homers, I think, for the Braves and limited at bats. He had a great year offensively. I think the Brewers are going to spend spring training. They would love for him to be the next offensive catcher that they bring in and turn into a good all-around catcher.
Yeah.
They've had great success with Omar Narvaez. Came to the Brewers as a 20 homer guy from Seattle who couldn't catch. And he left as a defensive catcher who couldn't hit. So somehow the next task needs to be to have a guy be good at both, obviously. They hope William Contreras is that guy. Offensively, he has a lot of tools. And they think there are some ingredients, I think is the way Matt Arnold put it, to turning him into a really good defensive catcher. So we'll see, what he turns into this season. But what the heck? At that point, I think I was trying to get to 23, and I thought, let's give William Contreras 30 homers.
That sounds good to me. Mike Carey, you got your hand up.
Yeah, International Signing Day is coming up, I think Saturday or Sunday. Are the Brewers expected to sign anybody?
Yeah, I think every, this stuff sort of has leaked out ahead of the signing day. And my understanding is that every club has someone in our, they do these rankings for whatever that's worth. But the Brewers will have someone who's on the MLB pipeline list of the top, whatever it is, 50 international prospects. So there will be some notable names. There will be some high dollar bonuses. And look, that's how the Brewers have got some of their fastest rising prospects have come through this international signing system. Jackson Chourio was a 7-figure bonus a couple of years ago as an international signing. There's another prospect, an outfielder named Luis Lara, who is moving up the list really fast. I've never seen him. I have no idea what his game is. He's a littler guy. He's 5'9", but he is a really good sleeper. If you're looking for a kind of a sleeper prospect to follow, next season. I don't know how much of a sleeper is anymore because he's moving up our list pretty fast. But another international signee. So that's a market that all these teams need to play in. That's a fascinating market where they're looking, they're signing guys at 16 that they've known for years and years. So you're talking about scouting kids and trying to project what they're going to look like at 16. And then what does that mean about what they're going to look like at 18 and 22 and 25? It is an incredibly difficult game to play. And MLB has, and the union and everybody has tried to work on improving that system and cleaning up that system, eliminating fraud. There was the international draft, if you remember, during the lockout, as they were negotiating the CBA, they were trying to get a deal on an international draft. That didn't happen. I don't think that's going to totally go away, but obviously that's a 5-year CBA, so it'll be a while before they get back to that as an issue. But Sunday is the day, by the way. Sunday is the day, and we'll have what we know about the guys. We'll have on the site that day.
You got time for one more question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And this is going away from the baseball side to more of your fun side. You do a podcast with Tim Dillard, and I didn't write the other guy's name down here.
It's Tim. It's me. I think it's going to be me and Tim this season.
Okay. And it sounds like you guys have fun. How did that come about?
The Brewers asked if I would participate in it.
Yeah.
And I said yes. I mean, it was really that simple. The Tim's involvement was part of it. He was so fun to cover as a player. I like how he comes at it from a different point of view. I love listening to him talk about pitching.
Mhm.
I think it will be back again in 2023. We've done only one episode this off season, but it will be back in some form. And I loved the conversations we were able to have with players and executives. I don't know if anyone else listened and enjoyed that, but it was an opportunity for me to have kind of conversations that I don't have every day in the clubhouse, where you're talking about X's and O's of a game or playing defense or what they thought about this at bat or that. It was with Andrew McCutchen, just asking about his upbringing, and his dad was a miner, and just what values his parents instilled in him coming up, and all of a sudden being one of the best prospects in this sport and making millions of dollars and being an MVP, and just coming from very humble beginnings to getting very high in this game. It was just really interesting to talk with him and talk with Brandon Woodruff about growing up in Mississippi, and just those conversations I thought I really enjoyed that. So I hope we continue to do that kind of stuff and just kind of see where it goes.
And then the conversation you had after the conversation was also interesting. We're talking about the conversation. So I enjoyed that. So,
well, yeah, I appreciate that. It was
Yeah.
something that was really interesting to do. And I'm like a podcast geek myself. So it was fun to have one, be one of like the 300 million Americans who have a podcast right now.
Yeah.
It was quite an honor, but we'll work on it. I think we could be a little tighter on time, to be honest. So I'm going to try to work on that. I think they should be less than an hour. That's my New Year's resolution, was to make podcasts that are less than an hour.
I listen to them when I walk, and so I'm usually out for at least an hour, so I don't mind the ones that go over. So, but
Noted.
you're right. Most people like them shorter. So,
I just thought it was a way. It was a way to talk about what's happening with the team, which is great. But then also, I think kind of get into the personalities. I mean, you can tell by the things the way I've answered tonight. I mean, to me, this is a sport about people. I probably said this last time. Doug Melvin is the one who just hammered this into my brain. The best thing about baseball is the people. And what makes the sport special is that you can look perfect. You can have the perfect body, the perfect mechanics, the perfect tool set. You can have all 5 tools. You can look the part and not make it. And then you can look like Jose Altuve and be an MVP. That, to me, is the coolest thing about baseball. It does not exist in the NFL. it does not exist largely in the NFL. It does not exist in the NBA largely. Sorry, Muggsy Bogues. It exists in baseball, and it's because there's part of being great in our sport that it happens between the ears and sort of in your heart that is you can't explain. You can't explain with the statistics. So I thought the podcast was kind of a great venue to sort of explore some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's Tim comes across, everyone thinks of him as a goofball. When he's talking baseball,
It
listen.
gets real serious. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And also when you guys come in, you're talking about the what happened the week, he comes in with all the stats. It's like he's the stats guy. It's like, wow, this is not something I expected. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's good. He's good.
Yeah.
He's trying to get great on those pre and post game shows and in the booth when he does the gets to do the analysis.
Yeah. So it sounds good. We're at an hour and a half here, Adam. I am so happy that you did this. Anybody have a last question for Adam before we let him go, and I'll do the drawing after he's gone because I had to cut him. I couldn't print my stuff out, so I cut it all out. Looks like Dixie's clapping there. Anybody question?
Well, Dennis, I have the book, so you can take me out of the drawing.
Okay.
And I want to say it's a beautiful book.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
If
you.
you guys
very
have
much.
it. Yeah, very
I had,
nice.
had
But
a
Adam,
lot
do
of
you have
fun.
any inside information? I don't know if other people have seen the story of the drunk guy on September 9th that drank 10 beers and
I
passed
missed
out
that.
outside. And then
I was
broke
there
into
all
the-
day, doubleheader day against the Giants, and he didn't come steal my wallet, so he obviously made good choices about where he went to do his. It doesn't make any sense to go into the press box if your aim is to steal, because
Yeah.
you're not going to find anything in the press box of value. But what a crazy story! And once again, he just pulled a door open. It's
Well, how did he get in there? So I work for the Brewers, and you need like employee swipe access at different points. And so and there's a clubhouse, the clubhouse guys are always out there. So how did
I
he
have
get
no
in?
idea. I have absolutely no idea because it's
I
the
couldn't
same.
believe it.
I can't get in the stadium.
Yeah.
So I have no earthly idea how he did it. And I'm
Yeah.
guessing that however he did it, if one of us tried to go do it right now, we could not do it. It's just like I think about when that Dodgers broadcaster slid down Bernie's slide and broke his arm. I've covered the Brewers since 2001. I'd never slid down Bernie's slide, but I did it like a week earlier. Somebody said, "Hey, do you want to go slide down the slide?" It was like 4:30 in the afternoon. We were done with council. I said, "Yeah, hell yeah, let's go do this." And I did. And I sure am glad I did it when I did, because I have a very strong feeling that I'm not going to get that opportunity again after that guy broke his arm.
Yeah, that slide is dangerous. I hated doing Bernie's slide tours. We used to do the tours. And because I tell them, bend your knees, because you slam into that wall. And I think Craig Council's mother broke her ankle on the family day. It was crazy. Yeah.
Well, it looks safer than the old one. The slide into Bernie's mug. Jeff D'Amico tore up his ankle when he was trying to win the ERA title in 2000 because he slid down Bernie's slide and tore up his ankle and then pitched and gave up 6 runs or something.
Wow.
So you got to be careful on those. Bernie's a killer, man. You got to watch out.
Yeah. That story of the drunk hit this little newspaper that I don't know. I don't know. My wife gets it, and it just hits here in Sun City, right around this area. And that story made it to that paper. I saw it there before I learned about it from Milwaukee. I thought, holy moly!
Well, it's partly because one of the things he took was allegedly the keys to the spring training complex, which
That's
I didn't
right.
know there was one set of keys for the whole complex.
Super
All right, thank
funny.
you, everybody.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Adam,
Yeah,
thank you. If you ever need any help from Saber, don't be afraid to ask.
Will do.
Thanks,
Will do.
Adam.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions, everybody, and thanks
You
for
bet.
reading. See ya.
You bet. Thank you. Take care. Okay, you know whose first name's coming out of this thing now that Mary said she has the book? What are the odds?
That figures. That's the
Okay.
story of my life.
I can't even get a name to come out. Oh, it's not.
Oh.
John Stodola. Is John still on? He was on. Some people had to leave early. That's John's still on. Congratulations, John. I hope you're a SABR member so I can get your address and everything from your SABR profile.
Yes, I am.
Okay, I will.
All right.
I'll send you an email and everything. I'll get the book ordered and get it sent out to you.
All right, thank you.
You bet. So I'm going to do the formal goodbye. If anybody wants to stick on afterwards and talk, that's fine. I want to end the recording so it doesn't get too much longer. So let me stop the recording. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Thanks again to Adam. It was as he's been good twice in a row, so it's been very good. So have a
Thanks
good
to you,
evening.
Dennis.
You
Thanks.
bet. Take care.
Thank you. Yeah.